Hello again, Ian Stokey with Mastermind Games, back for more Malifaux, and this time, the Ikiryo. Okay, Stormy Gray 09088. So the Ikiryo is a direct manifestation of Kirai and Koku's rage and grief. I'm kind of going for something I would call kind of a photo negative of the color scheme I used for Kirai. This was one of the first spirits she manifested, and I believe it's been a while since I've read the fiction she first appeared in. I believe this is the one that went directly after the man who fired the bullet that took the life of her lover. So, kind of going for a coal black skin, possibly with some red sort of lighting on it, as well as just a hateful red lighting in the eyes and possibly emanating from her mouth. Stark white hair, and I'm going to try something new on the hair when I get to that. Keeping the brush moist but not overly wet. And this is also Kirai's totem, and in earlier versions it could not be hired, only summoned. It could only be summoned when Kirai took damage, which could be voluntary. In the first edition, I think they dropped that aspect for second, but okay, I'm gonna let that dry and then move on and hope I've got this figured out. Alright, the next part's gonna get tricky no matter how I do it, so matte white. Just see if this goes the way I think it will. Operative word being think. It's going to go along the hair, and again I'm using just enough water to thin the paint. Now I might switch to a larger brush once I get the finer details out of the way, but for now I'm just going to use this one. And this is a substitute for the Reaper Master Series Pure White, which I'll be switching back to once I have used this up. I've nicked her arm a bit, but that'll be okay. I can touch up later. I'll stick with this brush for this part. So, there is not much more to say about the Ikiryo. There's not even that much more fiction about her because she is a part of Kirai. There are times when the part of her that is the Ikiryo, the grief and the rage at her loss, take over. And one thing that her experiences have cost her is her kindness. And while there's major things that happen to her in the 3rd edition fiction surrounding her, it's left kind of vague, but it doesn't look good. Okay, that's a pretty good. What was that? That's somebody setting off firecrackers in the neighborhood. It's nothing to worry about. And while that dries for a minute, 09143 yellow bone, I'll get her teeth and nails. And again, I'm keeping my brush moist but not overly wet, using just enough water to thin the paint. That's too much. Okay, let's see here. And yeah, the nail here really does curve back like this. Human fingernails will grow in really weird corkscrew patterns if they aren't trimmed. Although technically speaking, the Ikiryo isn't really human, but okay. Now, there are a few frame problems. Okay, I think we're okay for now. Leather white 09062. So this is an off-white. It's too much water on that paint. I don't think I'm going to be able to switch brushes and loosen up on this any. There are too many other colors in close proximity right now. Now I can loosen up a little bit, looks like, so switch to a bigger brush for a minute and get the bulk of the dress. Now the trim is going to be done in a darker color, but so I'm not necessarily going to worry about getting that, but no, starting to ramble. Yeah, I'll do the underside in the darker color. That's what it'd be. We'll say that's what would make the most sense to me as I paint. Need a little more of that off-white. So again, leather white 09062. And I'm heading in the right direction for what I want. We'll see what it looks like when I get to the end, though. There's still going to be some experimentation I'm going to be doing as I paint. It's starting to look a bit like she's wearing a wedding dress, which is very appropriate considering that's one thing Kirai never got to do, thanks to Governor Kitchener's interference and unintentional assassination of his own son. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to let that dry, and then I should be able to wrap up base coats when I come back. So, back in a minute. Okay. is it? Dark Elf Skin 09164. So this should be lighter than the... I'm going to actually need a little bit more than that because of the underside of the skirt here. So when I'm done, this should be substantially darker than the skin tone I've got on her. Or no, the skin's going to be darker than this. Getting mixed up. Alright, just... And don't be afraid to grab your models at weird angles to get everything. So while my color scheme here is inspired by what is essentially a reverse or photo negative of what I did on Karai, the details are vastly different. The Ikiryo has fewer accessories, but many more wrinkles and other features that Karai herself lacked. This is why I didn't care about getting the underside when I did the white here, because it was going to be done in this darker color anyway. Being real careful under there. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of this is being obscured by that long mane of hair. So, okay. And that's not trimmed, that's just a seam where the pieces fit together. Being real careful in this fold here. Okay, some of these don't have, and I just see a spot of the white I missed. That's alright, I can touch that up later. Just touch that up off camera. This brings to mind actually a video game that was released on the Nintendo only in Japan, but translated playthroughs are available on YouTube, called Sweet Home. And it's possibly the first example of a horror-based RPG style game. And Ikiryo brings to mind the main monster from that, and apparently there's also a full-blown movie based off of this as well. Though, I don't know if the movie's based on the game or the game was based on the movie. I found that on YouTube as well, but interestingly enough. And that's good enough on that, I think. So I'm going to go to Uniform Gray to get the base. But interestingly enough, Resident Evil I've heard was supposed to originally be a remake of this sweet home game, and that didn't work out. It wound up becoming its own thing. But that's just me rambling a bit about something I find interesting that's tenuously related to this. I'll just touch up that white I missed off camera. That would be the ghost white, or no, the leather white. Ghost white would be the highlight on this. Being real careful because the hair does actually contact the base, so whereas Kirai had just that one tiny contact point, the Ikiryo has much more solid ones, so I shouldn't have to worry as much when it comes to highlighting her. Okay. Let's go ahead and take that leather white 09062 right now and just do that little touch up there. Looks like I need to touch up her arm as well, so I'll just do that real quick. Just gonna get that in this channel here and up there. Yeah. And then Stormy Gray 09088 and just touch up that right arm where I got the white on her. Someone in my area did his Kirai and box set almost exclusively as lighting effects, doing all the spirits as sort of translucent glowing green, and that's definitely another way you could go with this. So just because I'm showing a way to paint these doesn't mean that it's the only way to paint them. So I'm going to let that dry completely, and when I come back I will be able to start shading, and I'm going to be playing around with... I got a specific idea for the skin beyond just making it really dark. We'll just see how that works out, so I'll be back in a bit. Okay, time to shade, and this could get kind of tricky. So I think I'll start with the hair, and I'm going to use Rainy Gray 09038 on that. Kind of working from the top down, or rather the highest point on the model to the lowest. So thinning with 1 part water to 1 part paint. Might go a little bit thinner. I want this to sink in and get in the crevices while still leaving some of that white showing through. This is not the lightest gray I have, it's the second lightest. But I think I might only be able to shade one color at a time on this model. Because if you shade adjacent colors, there's a strong chance those colors will blend in together. Now that can work for you, but there are times when you want to avoid that, so it's just something to keep in mind in general. And I'm being very meticulous here. Yeah. As much as I'd like to do another color, I'm going to have to leave it at that, so a little more somewhere on the top right here. Let that dry completely and then move on. Okay, dry enough I can move on. 09163 Dark Elf Shadow. Again, 1 part water to 1 part paint. Blot that out with the paper towel. Should be able to touch that up. Yep, see right there, that's what's good about shading is it'll just soak right up in the recesses, but it can be bad when it goes into an area you don't want it. That's just something to be mindful of and something to be aware of. The paint will definitely do that to you, so just keep it in mind. Okay. Yeah, I can really only do 1 color at a time the way this is going right now, so I have to let that dry completely, then I can move on. Okay. Linen White 09061. Again, I've thinned it with 1 part water to 1 part paint. Being careful around the other colors. Don't want to get this on the dark. And it kind of happened at the knot in the belt anyway, so paper towel, dab that out a little bit. You'll notice I'm using the entire brush, not just the tip. It really helps and speeds things up to use the entire surface area of the tool instead of just one piece of it. I'm also just trying to focus right now, so I tend not to talk much when I'm getting hyper-focused. It's just a weird trait I have. Trying to get a fair bit underneath there. The Ikiryo is not flush with the base. Okay, it's got it pretty good. Let that dry completely and then move on. You know, I'm going to take a gamble and try the teeth actually, so stained ivory 09142. Give that a shot, see what we end up with. I just realized I referred to myself as a we. That is not a good sign. Okay. Let that dry and move on. Okay. Wow, it's been about an hour since I put the white on. It still doesn't look completely dry, but I'm gonna try moving on anyway. Pure black 09037. This is gonna be the first. I'm going to thin this with 2 to 3 parts water and 1 part paint, but this is only going to be the first layer of shading I put on the skin. I'm going to try a little experiment here. Being careful around the mouth since I already shaded the teeth. Being careful on the back of the neck. Again, I'll be experimenting here. We'll just see what the result is. Not all experiments work out the way you hope they will, but we'll just see what happens. Being real careful around the claws and just dabbing it on with the tip of the brush near there. Okay. A little more on the chin, the upper lip. I'm going to let that dry completely before I move on. And we'll just see how my experiment works out. And I'm having a blur again, oh boy. Alright, back in a bit. Okay. I'm going to attempt the lighting and shading I want to do, or lighting effects I want to do, and the last of the shading. We'll just see how this goes, because this could definitely get kind of weird. Matte white, using just enough water to thin the paint. Just going to carefully fill in the eyes. And the mouth. Now that takes a second to dry. I'll take Stormy Gray 09088 and get the base. Thinning this out with 1 part water to 1 part paint. Carefully going around every part of the model that's connected to the base. Alright. Vampire red. Two to 3 parts water to 1 part paint for a lighting effect, and here's where it's going to get kind of experimental. I'm just going to go over all of it. All the skin. Now the eyes and the mouth should be glowing. The rest of this, well, we'll just see if this works out in the real world the way it works out in my head. It's an experiment, so we'll just see what happens. I'm getting this thinner than I normally would for a, well, again, you want your lighting effects thin anyway, and I just put my finger on the gray I just did. Okay, there we go. We'll just see what that looks like when I finish up. I'll just go ahead and do a quick once over on that gray again, since I managed to touch it a couple of times. Let that dry, and then I can highlight and see what we get. Back in a bit. Alright, time to highlight, and we'll see how these experiments worked out. Yeah, we're okay. I'm going to start with Creamy Ivory 09144. Straight paint, no water. Using a ragged feathered brush. This one looks good. Rubbing most of the paint out on a paper towel. It looks like there's next to nothing left. And lightly dusting the area to be affected. Refreshing as needed. Using a little more straight paint than I normally would on that one nail. It doesn't look so good. And I just realized I left my detail brush in the water for however long it's been. Oh boy, I gotta watch that. Now, Adamantium Black 09124. This is a metallic black. And this is the other part of my little experiment with her flesh tone. something ragged and feathered, rubbing the paint out. And lightly dusting. Going against any raised areas, such as the fingers. Okay, so some of that red's still showing through. That's good. Let's see what happens when I do the face. Not too bad. Not quite what I pictured, but not too far from it either. Pearl white 09100. Metallic white. I don't know if I can get this to cooperate. There we go. This, if I find an appropriate brush. Not that one. I need to grip this one. Doing this on the hair. I want to get kind of a weird sheen on it. Kinda works. Seems like much better on the black though. Ghost white 09063. Going against the wrinkles in her dress. Though maybe calling a friend of the Ikiryos an it would be more appropriate. But then again, more or less just an embodiment of rage and pain. And it seems like some of my shading on the white got out of hand. Dark Elf Highlight 09165. A little more straight paint on the belt there. It's a little more straight paint to kind of polish up the trim where the white wound up getting out of hand, and I didn't catch it in time to fix it. Do this more properly down here. A little more of that most white right there. Rub that off. Take that black and kind of touch that up a little bit. Okay, that should fix it, kinda. Let's see, Misty Gray 09090. Okay. Not too bad. I did some experimenting and some things worked, some things did not, so that's how experiments go. Pure black 09037. Switching over to a flathead brush if I can get a grip. Keeping the brush moist but not overly wet, using just enough water to thin out the paint. Just lining the edge of the base to clean it up. And there we go. The Ikiryo. Okay. Alright. Focus a bit. Next I'll be doing another model very important to Kirai. Until next time though, I am Ian Stokey with Mastermind Games, signing out.